So welcome everybody. It's nice to have everybody here, different people from across the province joining us for this tutorial that Brittany has put together and participating in this Q&A session as well that will, as I just mentioned, will be added onto Brittany's tutorial. My name is Margaret Berklee and I'm the chair of the program committee for OGEHR and the president of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers.
Hello there, I'm Man-Yi Sun, and I'm excited to be joining Marg as your second moderator for today's session. I am OGEHR's email coordinator, and I'm in contact with you on a weekly basis. And I am a member of the OGEHR Communications Committee.
Today our clinician is Brittany McCorriston, and Brittany's tutorial, as you've just seen, is on notation software. It's an introduction to notation software, and it's only one of several that Brittany is going to put together and host throughout the 2021 year that is coming up. Future tutorials are on the future Handbell, the virtual Handbell project that is, she's actually giving the tutorial for Saturday, November the 21st at 2 o'clock. And then her next one is Writing for Bells, How to Get Your Ideas Down on Paper. And her last one will be a follow-up to today's, which is Notation Software Part 2.
So our clinician today, Brittany McCorriston, has been playing handbells for over 10 years. You would not know this to look at her because she is so young, but she has been playing for a long time, and she has a significant amount of handbell experience. She's presently working towards a Bachelor of Music in Contemporary Writing and Production at the Berklee College of Music. Brittany specializes in music notation and editing and is currently an assistant editor for Berklee Press, where she has worked on over 15 different publications. Brittany also has a passion for teaching and believes that fluency in music technology is beneficial to all music learners. So welcome, Brittany. Thank you very much. We're very excited to have such an experienced musician and, well, may I say it, expert on notation. So at this point, we will be taking questions submitted via the Zoom text chat.
And we have one from Kathy Bear already, and her question to you, Brittany, is what are other names for Option and Command buttons? Because she can't see those on her computer.
Yeah, so excellent question, Kathy, because this is actually something that we discussed. So I'm using a Mac computer, and so some of my key commands are just a little bit different. So essentially, if you're using a Windows computer, anytime that I say command, it's the control button, and then option is the alt button. But besides that, they're the same. So if there was like a number or a letter after that, so if I said like Command Z, then it would be Control Z. And I'm really sorry about that, but I will be sure for the next one to make sure that I say both of them.
Great. Thanks, Brittany, for straightening that out. So, Brittany, as someone who is a complete beginner, a novice to using notation software, what would you recommend would be the most helpful in learning how to use a program like MuseScore?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things that you can do. The first one is definitely check out the tutorials online through the MuseScore website, because they're really good. If you've already downloaded MuseScore as well, there's kind of a little help thing at the top. And if you scroll over to that, you can also like directly access their online, their manual that has everything. So there's both like videos you can watch, as well as if you're more of a reader, you can do that. I usually prefer the reading stuff, but that's just me. The other thing that I really like to do was when I just got started was I just found music that I had at home and kind of just started typing it in just to kind of see what I could do. And through that, I kind of just learned new things as I went. And so each time I had to find something new, I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this. I just kind of, you can put it into Google, and usually if you just put like MuseScore, how do I do this? It almost always comes up right away with the answer as well. So there's kind of multiple ways to attack that when you're getting started.
Right, fantastic. The there are links to additional materials as well as the MuseScore download page on the OGEHR website. We have also included a link to the MuseScore tutorials for those who would like to explore some of the materials available. And you will find all that information on the OGEHR tutorial webpage.
Thanks. Brittany, we have a question from Mary. She's wondering if it's possible if you can give her a list of all the shortcuts that you were referring to.
Yes, that was something that was supposed to happen, and I'm not sure where my brain slipped up. So yes, for sure, I can make sure that we get that probably onto the OGEHR website. It's like just the specific ones that like I mentioned in the video. But I know that also within the MuseScore website, they have, I believe, a page as well with like very common ones. So in the meantime, before we get that up, you can always search like common MuseScore keyboard shortcuts, and that usually brings up some of the most, like the ones we use most frequently. But yes, I'll be sure to get those up as well.
I also wanted to mention that when you have launched MuseScore and you're in the application itself, you can always navigate through the menus. And if you go to, say, an options menu and you bring up the menu page, it will actually show you the shortcut key next to the command itself. So if you were looking at the edit menu, and you can see that undo maps to Control Z, and that, or Command Z if you're on a Mac. So you can definitely go to the MuseScore application itself, and it will help you by showing you some of these often used keystrokes in the menu itself.
Just to add on to that, you can also, if you like hover over a button for just like a second or two, it also usually comes up with like a brief description of what it is. So just so you don't know right away what it is, you have to hold your mouse there for like 1 or 2 seconds and not move it, but then something will pop up that you can read. It does also disappear as soon as you move the mouse, but when you're just getting started, it's good to know that as well.
Fantastic. Let's see, we have a question from Rob Cairns. He wants to know, does MuseScore export PDFs?
I believe it does, and there's different ways to do it. So if you're on a Mac, the easiest way that I do it is if you were to just print it, and so like you would normally, and then instead of hitting print, there's like a little button on the bottom left that you can hit like save as PDF instead of actually printing it. So that's the easiest one if you're on a Mac. If you're on a Windows computer, I believe if you just go into the file menu where you would like normally save or open other files, I'm looking at it now, it says export, and then you can select a PDF as well. And there's a couple different file versions you can do, but PDF is listed as one of them.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Brittany.
Yes. Now, Brittany, if I was to attempt to do this is something that would happen. I'd probably mess up somewhere. And is there any way of correcting after the fact? Is it ever too late not to sort of salvage mistakes that I've incorporated inadvertently?
Yeah, so everyone makes mistakes. And so I think like MuseScore is no different than if you're writing with paper and pencil. There's always like an erase option. And it's kind of like they always say when you're writing music to write in pencil, right? So that you can change it. And it's the very same thing with MuseScore, any notation software really, is that you can change what you're doing. There's a couple different ways to do that. The biggest one that I always do is just if you're just trying to go back a couple things that you messed up or maybe you clicked in the wrong note, Command Z or Control Z is undo. It's the same as if you were in like a Word document or something. It's the same kind of thing. And then also just to save a lot. Save as often as you can. I kind of do it like, for me, it's just like I have it memorized where it's Command Z or Command S or Control S. So after I work for a couple minutes, I just kind of just like hit those and it automatically saves it. But if you're one technique that I really like is that if you're at a point in your music composition where you're like, I think I like this, but I'm not sure, but I want to keep it just in case, then I always just save a copy of what I'm doing so that I can go back to that if I need to. So if you're kind of exploring new territory with a composition or arrangement, then I always just save an extra copy so that I can go back if I need to. It's really important also just to name your files in some kind of like legible way, just so that you know what you're doing and where it is too. So there's definitely been times where I've kind of been working through a composition and I close it and don't touch it for a couple of days, and I have no idea where it is on my computer. So try and always like just remember like where you saved it, or at least give it a name that you remember, so then you can search for it potentially too if you can't find it. So
Great. So Brittany, I have a piano keyboard at home. Can I use this in conjunction with MuseScore to enter notes?
yes, you can. So I always have I wish you guys could see it, but it's like in front of me I have like a keyboard underneath my desk that kind of slides out on the drawer. But yeah, so most keyboards nowadays, I'm talking like electric keyboards, come with something called like a MIDI input. And it's either done through like an actual MIDI cable, which aren't as common anymore. They kind of have like 3 prongs on them. Or there's also, it's like a USB-C, like not a USB-C.
It's a USB MIDI.
That one. But it looks just like, I call it a printer cable because it's the same one that you plug the printer into. So
Yes.
those you can use, and you just plug it right into your computer, and the MuseScore will pick it up automatically.
Right. I have a couple of keyboards at home. One of them has a full has a full MIDI, the old style cable with the large barrel connector with multiple pins in it. My other keyboards are USB MIDI, and they use either a full-size USB-B connector, which is the printer style connector that Brittany, you just mentioned. I have another keyboard that actually uses the micro B, which is much smaller, but it's similar to the kind that you connect your phone to. Or if you're more modern, you might have a USB-C connector.
Thank you. Brittany, we have another question from Kathy, and it's about a bell tree. So is there a way to make a bell tree solo easily into 2 parts when splitting up? So I think Kathy is thinking, like, is she able to highlight each of the person's notes?
Yeah, I think in the question, Kathy is also there, I believe, both reading off a single staff, and it is a single part. So it's not a 2-piece, it's not a 2-part piece, it's a single part, but they, I think in this case, want to highlight individual notes for the first player versus the second player.
Yeah, that's something you can definitely do. How I would there's different ways you can kind of attack it. If you kind of like have it already printed, and so like you highlight one person's notes on like one color and one on another, you could do it with like 2 staffs kind of running along each other with, so then you would have like it almost like a duet, if that makes sense. Or you could split it and just have like one part on one page, one part on another page. Both are completely doable. Within MuseScore, I believe, and I'll be sure if this is definitely something that I would consider like more advanced, so something I can cover in the next one, or we can email back and forth about it. But there is a feature that after you kind of like, let's say it looks like chords, you can like export it so that it goes into like multiple lines, so then it's just one note per line. There's a way to do that so that you don't even have to like type it, you just have to type the whole thing in, and then it will split it for you as needed. So
Fantastic. So Brittany, what other music notation software would I find out there, and how would I choose one versus another?
yeah, so music software, like the notation one, it's all very personal, and it's very hard when you're starting off to be like, oh, this is the one that you use, because it really depends on what you're doing. And when I was a beginner, I hated that answer, because even right now, sometimes I get like, I go into a music store and I'm like, I need this. And then they're like, well, what are you doing with it? And I'm like, I don't know yet. I just know that I need one. So the kind of strategies that I've worked with is I kind of go with like the most basic one if I can, free if I can, which would be MuseScore. And then as you kind of keep working and find there's still limits to MuseScore, and so once you kind of hit that limit or you can't really find a workaround, that's when you start looking for a different one. So me personally, I use Finale. That's the one I started off with, so I'm also a little bit biased when I say that, but it's also the one that we use in editing the most frequently because it can do the most when you're doing something called engraving. But I know a lot of people out there who just kind of do their own compositions, their own arrangements, and they love the other one, which is called Sibelius, because it's a little bit more user-friendly when you're kind of like typing notes in or rearranging stuff. So in that way, it really depends on what you're doing. And at the same time, I like to start off with, like, MuseScore is a great one to start off with, because once you know one, it's very similar to kind of switch between the other ones.
Right. Sounds like a great launching off point to be diving in with MuseScore, because as you said, Brittany, it is freely available for anyone to use. Perfect. Thanks, Brittany.
So, Brittany, I think my next question is sort of a segue, this last one, into this next question. You said it's a personal preference what notation software you use. My guess there's a lot of personal workflow in terms of when you are actually sitting down to your computer and starting to produce. Can you describe that process to us?
Yeah, so for me, I usually don't open my notation software until I kind of have an idea in my head. So this is just from more like a compositional arrangement thing. I always start at the piano, like my physical piano, with pencil and paper. And I kind of, for me, I just like draw little notes. And they're not even like, I'm lazy, I don't even do the stems. I just draw dots on the paper. and maybe some chords. And then once I have that, then I'll bring it into my notation software. But it is very different for everyone. And so it really depends, and it's a journey to kind of figure out what works for you. I also use the playback a lot, which I think I touched briefly on the end of the video, just to hear kind of what you're doing and as you go along. But then also in January, I'm going to be doing another session that's focusing specifically on kind of workflow and arranging and stuff. So if you guys are more interested in that, be sure to come out to that. But I would definitely say that one of my biggest pieces of advice for someone who's just starting in notation, as well as just an arranger composition, is just to be patient. It takes time. Nothing ever sounds good the first time. And that's why I always say, like, when even arranging, it's the same thing. Like, you do it in pencil for a reason. And so don't be afraid to erase your mistakes. And it's the same thing when it comes to notation software. It's like, be patient. There's always a way to go back. As long as you're saving, but there's almost always a way to go back. So don't just kind of, when you're first starting, like, really just kind of take it as like, it is a learning process. And in conjunction with that, and I'm horrible for this, if you have a deadline, don't start it like right before, because it's a mission to kind of learn the software and also get it done. So that's what I'd say. When you're first starting, take it more as like, I'm going to learn something new, rather than like, I need to get this done, because you'll have way more frustration from I need to get this done, so I need to figure out everything, while also it just won't be fun. Trust me, I've been through it too many times. So that'd be my advice.
Thank you, Brittany. I think on those words of wisdom and advice, that's a good place to bring closure to this introductory session on notation software. Thank you to everybody's questions that were part of this Q&A. And I think we may have delved a little bit into part 2. And Brittany, certainly, we're going to put her email address on the website so that you can ask her specific questions, and maybe she can use them to move forward into what the content for her next session will be as well. Thank you, Brittany.
Thanks again, Brittany. That was a fabulous session. So moving forward, please mark Sunday, October 25th on your calendars and plan on being part of OGEHR's next Handbell tutorial session. We will have Lisa Kyriakides presenting a video called getting started with a new piece of music. And she promises to offer you tips and hints to make you a handbell champion. So we'll hold her to it. And we hope that you encourage your OGEHR friends to join us both for the video and the subsequent Q&A session.
On behalf of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers, I would like to thank all of you for participating in this Q&A, and to thank Brittany McCorriston in particular for putting the tutorial together and being such a wonderful host for the Q&A session. As Manny said, excellent information to go home with and to start playing with. We encourage all of you to participate in Brittany's further tutorials as well. And get all of your ringers who might be interested in doing this to participate in the virtual handbell project. So she's going to have a tutorial on November 21st, and with that information, she will supply us with all the details of how we can be part of that project. So we encourage you to do that. In the interim, she wrote a great article for this month's issue of the Clapper Chatter, and I think it gives a good overview of that project. So thank you for joining us for this fourth tutorial that we have hosted this year. Thank you.